We are looking at Business Literacy Module 9, interest calculations, and I'm going to discuss interest calculations in two parts. This is part 1. The first thing we need to do when we talk about interest is we must distinguish between simple interest and compound interest. Simple interest will always be less than compound interest, and therefore the pile of money there on the simple interest side is a small pile of money, and on the compound interest side you have a big pile of money. Remember that in the exam, the formulas are not given, so you must memorize the formulas and know them. So the formula for simple interest is I equals P times R times T. I just always remember it as one part because it is simple. And then on the compound interest side, the formula is A equals P multiplied by 1 plus I to the power N. What does this stand for? Well, on the simple interest side, I is for interest, P is for the principal amount, R is for interest rate, and T is for time. But on the compound interest side, you will see we are not calculating the interest. We are indeed calculating the future value A. So A is equal to the future value. P remains the principal amount. Now we write the interest rate as I and not as R. And we write the period as N, where previously we wrote it as T in the simple interest formula. Remember that the principal amount is the amount that you are investing or that you are borrowing. So let's compare the two interest types. I already said to you that when we are calculating simple interest, we are calculating the interest, but when we are calculating compound interest, we are calculating the future value. And so we must first establish the relationship between the future value and the interest. And I've given it to you there. The future value A is the sum of the principal amount and the interest. So if A is then equal to principal plus interest, then interest will be future value minus present value, and the present value will be the future value minus the interest. Let's have a look at how it is typically asked of you in an exam. Two ways. Here's the first way. It says determine the difference in interest when 160,000 is invested for 5 years at 4.5% annually. The difference in interest when you have this option of investing it either as simple interest or as compound interest. First thing we do is we write down the two formulas, and then we simply replace the values. The 160,000 principal amount is given. The interest rate 4.5% is given, and the period 5 years is given. Okay, so we can simply then calculate it, and we see that our simple interest is 36,000 Rand. On the compound interest side, we must first take that 4.5% there and turn it into a decimal by moving the comma 2 places to the left. So it then becomes 0.045, and when we add that to the 1, it is 1.045, and that will be to the power 5. And then we get a much higher amount on this side of 199,389 Rand and 11 cents. Why is this amount so much higher? Well, it is the future value. It includes the principal amount of 160 plus whatever interest we earned, and therefore to compare apples with apples, or in this case interest with interest, we must first make interest the subject of our formula on the compound interest side. So our interest will be our future value A that we have just calculated minus the principal amount that was given, and then we get an amount there of 39,398.89 cents and 11 cents, and we can now simply subtract the lower amount from the higher amount, always the compound interest amount will be higher. And now we have determined the difference in interest. The difference in interest using the two types of interest is 3,389 Rand and 11 cents. The other way they can ask it is they say, how much more will 180,000 Rand investment be worth if it's compounded annually at 6.5% for 5 years? So now the question is about the future value. How much more will the investment be worth? Same thing. We write down the two formulas again. We replace the values to get the answers. Just remember here, once again, to change the 6.5% to a decimal before we add it to the 1. And we get 58,500 on the simple interest side and 246,615 Rand and 60 cent on the compound interest side. Now, in this case, that is a future value. That is what we want to live with, but we must first calculate the future value on the simple interest side. We were given the principal amount, 180,000. We've just calculated the interest, so we can add the two together, and then we can subtract that answer from the compound interest answer, and we see that our investment will be worth 8,115 Rand and 50 cent more if we invest it as compound interest as opposed to simple interest.